Okay, you just saw the James Gunn Superman trailer and you want to read some Superman comic books. That is literally all I am good for. So let me explain to you what Superman comics you should and should not read. So the first thing is Superman premiered in 1938 with Action Comics #1, and I am not going to recommend any comics of his until 1985. That is not to say there weren't good comics in there, but for a modern audience, I just can't imagine recommending something pre 1985 DC. You know, there are plenty of excellent comics out there, but for a modern audience, it's quite different than what you would come to expect. There is Alan Moore's Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, which ends the original Superman continuity, and that is great. But truthfully, it's probably not the best place to start if you've never really read Superman comics. Even if you have, that is the end of a continuity. And while it may be well done, it probably won't resonate with you the way it would if you are, somebody who's older than me, let's just say. After 1985, John Byrne rebooted Superman with 4 titles. There was Superman Action Comics, The Adventures of Superman, and Superman the Man of Steel, if I'm remembering them correctly. Those are pretty good. They are a little dated. There's some stuff in there that probably hasn't aged very well, but you do get some phenomenal John Byrne art. You do get some phenomenal old school Superman stories. The issues might take you a little bit longer to read. I think they might be a little wordy, but they're worth checking out. If you were really looking for a kind of start to a Superman continuity, like I said, that starts in 1985, post Crisis on Infinite Earths. So you've got a fresh start. The Man of Steel miniseries wraps everything up as far as like an origin, and then it's all off as you would expect. After John Byrne, I think you kind of start, it might not be instantaneously, but you start the Dan Jurgens era. So if you're familiar with the death of Superman and the return of Superman with Doomsday and everything, that's that era. And my understanding is that's a little bit earlier in that era than later. All the books are pretty interconnected. I've read a lot of the death of Superman and Return, but I haven't read a lot outside of that. And that was the majority of the 90s. So if you are a 90s kid, that's going to be your most recognizable Superman. You're going to have him with the mullet in it. And eventually it turns into the red, blue, electric type Superman, which is kind of strange. What I strongly recommend is when that era ends, Jeff Loeb starts writing Superman, and you have a few other writers, specifically Joe Kelly, writing Action Comics. This is in 1999 and it goes till like 2003 or something. It's a few years long and it is a really excellent run of Superman. Ed McGuinness provides a lot of the art for the Jeff Loeb issues, and Kano provides a lot of the art for the Joe Kelly issues. Joe Kelly has written some stuff that I've really loved, but also some stuff that I thought was a little overwritten. And I thought his Superman was really well done. I would say that it hit the right balance between wordy, but letting the art breathe. And I haven't finished all of it. I did read recently Action Comics 775, Whatever Happened. No, that's not Whatever Happened. Truth, Justice, and the American Way. And I had always heard a lot of hype about it. And I was kind of expecting not to really like it that much because of the hype, but I actually really liked it. So that's a really fun era that I think is really worth checking out. Brian Azzarello and Jim Lee did a 12-issue arc that is controversial, and it's not what you would exactly expect from a Superman, especially by Jim Lee. I think you're hoping for a little bit more action and bravado, which you don't quite get, but it's a really good story. You might not appreciate it on your first read through because you're expecting something else, but when I went to revisit it this summer, I was very impressed with the story, what it was saying, the art. It's different than Batman Hush, but there's certain things that are a little similar. I really recommend it. Like I said, it's not big and flashy, but it is actually pretty well done. During that time, you also have Greg Rucka on one of the Superman books. That kind of ties more into the Infinite Crisis event, and I think that stuff's been pretty good. I can't say it's like stellar over in Action Comics. You do get like an Ivan Rice doing the art of Chuck Austin story. So not the best writing per se. It's not terrible, but you do get some really great Ivan Rice art. My book, March of the Mystics, is on sale right now for just $1 digitally, anywhere ebooks are sold, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. My favorite era of Superman is probably by Jeff Johns, which is not much of a surprise if you know much about me and what I think about DC Comics and my love of Jeff Johns, frankly. So, if you can start with Superman's Secret Origin, that is a really cool, almost Superman the movie, where it deals with his childhood in Smallville, it deals with him showing up in Metropolis. You get people like Metello, and I think Parasite's in it. It's been a while since I've read it. Lex Luthor. The art is by Gary Frank. It looks very much like it is Christopher Reeves, and that's really cool. They've done a few other arcs together, and I recommend all of them, a Brainiac arc as well as a Legion of Superheroes arc. That Brainiac arc in particular is maybe my favorite. It feels like the Chris Reeves Brainiac movie we never got. Kurt Busiek was also writing Superman alongside Jeff Johns at the time, and the Camelot story with Carlos Pacheco is very good, but I wouldn't necessarily say his run as a whole was something that was captivating. It's something that I've started looking at with a little bit more nostalgia because it is close to 20 years old at this point. So that is something maybe worth checking out. Like I said, the Camelot arc with Carlos Pacheco art is fantastic. We also then have like World of New Krypton with James Robinson and I think some of the other guys. That's okay. It's a pretty big Krypton, Zod story. And I love Zod, but it still didn't quite hit the way as I wanted it to. But it is something that I feel if you were to read it in a pretty condensed time, if you spent a month reading all the different issues, you'd probably get a pretty interesting Superman story. Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale did Superman for All Seasons, which is very much a year one story. And I know we're all tired of year one stories, but Tim Sale is the greatest artist of all time. And this is one of the best looking books you'll ever find. Spend the money on the Absolute Edition. Trust me, it's 100% worth it. This comic is just one of the best. I tend to read it around like Thanksgiving. To me, it's a very good Thanksgiving comic book, even though it does span all seasons. So I would almost just say read this first. More than anything, read Superman for all seasons. Tim Sale did do another Superman thing with Darwyn Cooke. The two all-time greats work together, and it is another early Superman story where like a meteor of kryptonite hits Metropolis and you've got Lex Luthor and eventually you've got a monster and stuff, and it's okay, it's pretty good. It's definitely not the crowning achievement of either of their careers, but it's definitely something worth talking about and reading because you get more Tim Sale art, and that's just it's great Tim Sale art too. I've maybe missed a couple of the modern runs before this, but I think we pretty much would be at the New 52 now, which is controversial. If you know anything about it, DC resets everything, and we have a brand new Superman. Grant Morrison writes a very captivating action comics with Rags Morales doing a lot of the art. Very beautiful, very interesting take on Superman. I really recommend it. It does get a little weird. It's not super long. I'm looking forward to rereading it in like one chunk. I read it monthly as it came out, but I am really excited to sit down soon and just spend like probably one long weekend going through all of it. That is definitely the highlight of that New 52 Superman. There was another arc by Jeff Johns and John Romita Jr., and then I think Jean Louis Yang or someone like him took over, and I think Romita stayed on the art, and that stuff's okay. Greg Pak did some Action Comics with that Superman, and that's pretty decent. The Superman Wonder Woman by Tony Daniel and Charles Soule was really good, but then it got swept up into a big crossover, which was okay. And then I don't think I continued reading it, but I wanted to because I think it was Peter Tomasi and Doug Mahnke on art. And that if that's the creative team, then that creative team alone usually delivers. So I would feel confident recommending that if that's the creative team without having read it. Then they brought the original Superman back, and Dan Jurgens joined the teams again. And I think he did the story with Lee Weeks to bring that Superman into the new continuity and replace the old one, yada, yada, yada. Some of that's complicated. I can't necessarily recommend those stories unless you're just like absolutely curious about why we went from like a 22-year-old Superman to like the 45-year-old Superman or however old he is. And then when they brought him back, they introduced him and Lois's son, Jonathan Kent, which he was like 10 at the time, cute little kid. There's been, from assholes, some controversy about him, but he's a pretty good character for the most part. When The original Superman Return, Dan Jurgens wrote, I think it was Action Comics, and I think like Patrick Zurcher was the artist, and Zurcher, I'm not really sure if I'm saying his name correctly. That was very good. That was similar at points to like a 90s feel with Superman with some of the characters he used from that run. And I really enjoyed that. As somebody who didn't read his whole 90s run, as somebody who doesn't hold it on that shit like level of esteem that other people do, I really enjoyed that one. That's a run I actually really liked as I was reading it. On the other title, Superman, you had Peter Tomasi with Patrick Gleason doing a majority of the art. And I really liked that one. That was probably my favorite of the two titles. And I thought that was a really fantastic Superman run. And it seemed like it was cut a little short, maybe, but for what you got from it, it was fantastic. That is definitely your era of 10-year-old Jonathan Kent, because I think as soon as that title ends, they aged him up. But the Peter Tomasi Superman, strongly recommend. We have the Brian Bendis run, which is a little controversial. This run deals with Superman's secret identity. It deals with why Krypton really blew up. But you've got people like Ivan Rice doing art. You've got Patrick Gleason. I think Steve Epting did some. John Romita Jr. You really get some pretty interesting people come along and draw Superman. Some, like Patrick Gleason, had some history, and Ivan Rice. But you also get, like I said, some other people like Steve Epting from Captain America, where I don't think he had ever done Superman before, but I could be wrong. I'm not always 100% on everyone's career. Bendis's run is pretty good. Couple crossovers that are all right. Nothing too major. Then I don't remember exactly who took over after he left. I think I had a little bit of a gap, but I've been reading the Joshua Williamson run recently for the past 2 years, and I've really liked that. He's had some fantastic artists on it, Jamal Campbell, and Dan Mora is doing the current arc. That has been really good, and you've got Lex Luthor working alongside Superman, and I just think it's been pretty neat for the most part, so I would recommend that one. Of course, there's always other stories. It's a lot of stuff I didn't mention, miniseries. I heard a lot of really good things about Christopher Priest's Superman Lost, I think it was called, that came out within the past year or two, but I haven't had a chance to read that yet. Superman Year One by Frank Miller on the DC Black label was interesting, and I feel like they've probably done another one or two interesting Superman's Black labels. I can't really remember without having them on hand, but if you had any questions about Superman, a rogue, a supporting character, I would love to help talk about what you could read with them. Tell me in the comments some of your favorite Superman stories, because after that trailer, I am definitely in the mood to read more Superman. So just talk to me about Superman, and let's just keep it all going. So thank you for watching.